Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. It's Sunday, February the 5th, and for today, I've got a good show planned for you. I'm going to start by talking about some big trends. I always like to keep a close eye on these key market-moving trends that affect the price of gold, silver, copper, and most importantly, the stocks in those metals. And so we'll start with the trends, the market-moving trend, and then I'm going to switch over to talking about a special part of my Substack site. I've made a transition over the last few months away from having a website at allanberryreports.com. That still is in existence, but what I've done is now everyone is pointed to my Substack. And the reason that I've done that is quite simply because Substack is a phenomenally great website that enables me to do podcasts, enables me to do videos, written reports, and incorporate my email list to the site. So at one easy push of a button, I can quickly get my work out to the audience that follows my stuff. And so I've done a big push to move my key reporting, which is my video reports as well as my written reports, are all available now on Substack. So I'm going to go over some of the key parts of Substack that I think I would like to point out to my audience. So let's get on to a screen share here. And I'm going to start with the US dollar. On Friday, the US dollar had a pretty good run, and that was because of the employment report that came out. Now, it came out it was a very strong report, but if you look at just the headline sort of data, if you do a little deeper dive into the what it was actually reported, it was what I said to some people was a too good to be true situation. And as is often the case, when something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. And what I garnered as I looked deeper into that economic or that employment number was that actually what we're seeing is the full-time employment is going down. The labor participation rate, there's a few million, maybe as much as 10 million workers that no longer are in the labor pool. And then a lot of the jobs that were created were, in fact, part-time jobs. So I made a statement that when people have to take on second and third part-time jobs is not what makes for a strong economy. Yet on Friday, the US dollar had a very good run, as you can see here. Last time it did this, back here in early 2023, it quickly rolled over, and that 50-day moving average that's been correcting and going through a death cross continued. And the trajectory or the angle of this drop is indicative of more of where it's going to continue to go. And so it has come close to that 50-day moving average, and I think it's going to roll over very quickly. Nothing has really changed as far as what has supported the US dollar for a lot of since 2021, when the currency traders got wind of the idea that the Federal Reserve was going to start raising interest rates in 2023 or 2022, sorry. And then the Fed actually did that with multiple meetings where they raised it 0.75%. Then in December, they only raised it 0.5%. Then in February, they only raised it 0.25%. And it is getting close to the peak rate that the Federal Reserve said that they were talking, their estimates are between 5 and 5.5%. And I believe that that means that they only have a couple more meetings of 0.25% moves left in them. They are over tightening, and you can see that in a lot of key economic indicators. You look at the housing sales, which have dropped dramatically at one of the fastest paces, I guess. I don't know if you can call it drop fast, but it's dropping off a cliff. And the housing sales, and then you look at the inverted yield curves, and they are suggesting that there is a serious recession coming in 2023. And I believe that those indicators are going to be proven to be exactly correct. And the net result will be that in latter part of 2023, probably in the second half of 2023, the Federal Reserve will have to get back into the quantitative easing business and start, lowering interest rates. In the past, that when they would raise interest rates, they would usually do it a couple times and then let the data come in to see if their efforts have actually worked and how it's playing out in the economic numbers. In this case, they've been relentlessly for many months now raising interest rates, meeting after meeting after meeting, without allowing the data to come in and show them what is actually happening. And a lot of those indicators are lagging indicators, and so the lagging indicators are troublesome. And I think when those lagging indicators come in, you're going to see this 200-day moving average on the US dollar roll over and get bearish and follow the path of the 50-day moving average. So I think 2023 is going to be a very troublesome year for the US dollar. On the other hand, as economists like to say, gold has been doing extremely well. It bottomed in September, October, and November for a triple bottom. Then in early November, it just blasted off, went through the 50-day moving average. Then not long after that, it went through the 200-day moving average. And since late December, it's been trading well above the 200-day moving average and the 50-day moving average. Now, it got smacked around pretty good on Friday, down $54, but it is still trading well above the 50-day moving average. And it's looking on like it's on a short-term, very oversold condition. I would expect that next week that gold will start improving again, and it won't be long before we're seeing highs above this 1978-75 range. And in 2023, I believe that we're going to start seeing new record highs and it go towards 2,500 and exceed that 2,500 range. As you can see here in early 2023, it went through a golden cross, and the combination of an excellent golden cross and a very strong January effect. This correction didn't happen until February, but until then, it had a spectacular January effect. So a spectacular January effect and a golden cross in early 2023, I think is indicative of where this price is going. It looks like the 200-day is about to start moving upwards, and the 50-day to stay well above that 200-day moving average. So as I said, I think gold has a lot higher to go. The same story can be said for silver. Here is the silver chart. And as you can see, it got beaten down pretty good, and it traded well below its 50-day moving average. It's on a short-term oversold condition, and I think it will bounce very quickly next week. And the 200-day will also start moving in a bullish direction, and the 50-day will stay well above the 200-day. It actually went through its golden cross in the latter part of the December 2022. So I still think this is a very powerful trend for gold. Let's have a look at copper, which is kind of the bellwether for the base metals. And as you can see here, it bottomed, broke out in November, traded well above its 50-day moving average and 200-day moving average, went through a golden cross in January 2023, had a spectacular January effect reading, and is still trading, even though he corrected also on Friday, it's still trading well above its 50-day moving average. And I don't think it's long before this 200-day moving average starts turning upwards and going in the bullish direction, and the 50-day moving average will stay well above the 200-day moving average. So those are the key metals that I follow. I follow gold because it's a sentiment driver for the metals sector as a whole, and also a very important driver of sentiment towards the gold stocks, silver stocks, copper stocks, and pretty much stocks in the entire metals complex. And so what gold does, silver follows, copper follows, and it's no wonder, because they're the key price that is paid attention to by the traders of the metals and the metal stocks is what they're doing in the US dollar terms. And as I said, I think there's a very strong argument that the bearish trend that started for the US dollar in November of 2022 will continue. Sure, it'll have some short-term bounces upwards, but I think the downward trend is in a very solid movement that will take it much lower. All right, so now I talked about and with copper, copper is a sort of the gold of the base metal space. Where copper goes, often goes, so goes the base metals. And some have said that, well, if the US economy goes into a recession, isn't that going to curtail some of the supply? I think you really have to look at who the major driver is and the major buyer of copper, which is China. And China has pulled back on their restrictions due to COVID and have sort of opened up the country for business again. And so they consume a lot of copper. India consumes a lot of copper. A lot of those Southeast Asian countries consume a lot of copper. So I think that they are going to continue to use up a lot of the supply of copper. And then you've also got the electric car revolution that, it continues to drive forward. And if I am correct that in the latter part of 2023, if the US starts lowering interest rates again, other countries will do the same, and that will create more buying of electric vehicles. And so I think copper is in excellent condition for 2023, and what we've seen with the Golden Cross in early 2023 and an excellent January effect reading is showing that copper is on a bullish trend. And I think that that's indicative of where it's going throughout 2023. Okay, so now I'm going to pop over to my Substack, and you can find me on or the report on rocks and stocks.substack.com. And this weekend I did a bunch of work on my rocks and stocks index. And I'm going to talk about that. So what I've done here is I've curated a bunch of companies that I follow by doing interviews with management. They are picks of mine, and I also talk about them a lot in my sector reports. And how I've broken this index down is I go into certain themes that are based on locations and types of metals that are being found. One of my favorite places to look for projects is in Nevada. I've had a lot of success in the past years since I started my report in 2005, picking companies in Nevada. And one particular area of Nevada really has my attention these days, and that's Eureka, Nevada. I believe it's growing into one of the most important regions of Nevada. And the reason I say that is Eureka had a long history from the 1860s until the 1960s of mines that were mining carbonate replacement deposits. Those carbonate replacement deposits tend to be silver, lead, and zinc. But a company called i-80 Gold has had a tremendous success on their project near Eureka called Ruby Hill, that they've found a CRD which has high grades of silver, lead, and zinc. But it also has an overprint of very high grade gold, from high grade to bonanza grades of gold, which is quite unique for a CRD deposit, because they tend to have low amounts of gold, but are made because of their silver, lead, and zinc. And if you look at CRD to CRD based on the silver, lead, and zinc, what i-80 Gold is found in Eureka, Nevada, would rank them very high in comparing to other important CRDs in the world, and would rank them at the top of the list, which is quite exceptional on its own. But then you add in this high grade to bonanza grade gold, and it makes it even more of a phenomenon, which is what they found at the CRDs to the south of the Archimedes pit, which was a historical producer of oxide gold. And what I think is, what is likely happening here is that you've got a network of structures that are the big cracks in the earth that allow in this case, the CRD mineralization, as well as the high-grade gold mineralization, to make their way from much deeper. Then when you get closer to surface, those fluids that contain those metals, the precious and the base metals, they need to get into a kind of rock that works somewhat like a sponge. It enables the fluids that come up through these deep cracks or faults in the earth to then spread out. And that's what has happened with the discovery that i-80 Gold has made. But they're not the only one that has made this remarkable discovery of CRDs with the overprint of high-grade gold. And in fact, if you look at the value of the metals that they're finding, it really is off the charts. You get values between $1,000 and even over $5,000 per ton. That's some of the best numbers that you're going to see anywhere in the world for any metal. And i-80 Gold has one of those. But what makes their story even more compelling is they also have two world-class gold deposits. One of them, so the CRD is to the south of the Archimedes pit. To the west and north, a little bit north of that same pit, they found the Ruby Deeps discovery, and then above the Ruby Deeps discovery and in very close proximity to that Archimedes pit is the 426 zone. And what's exceptional about 426 is that it has a significantly more amount of oxide gold than they had anticipated would be there. And so what it enables them to do is use that western part of the pit to gain easy access to the 426 zone. And then that will be very high margin production. And they can use that to then lead them down to the Ruby Deeps discovery, which has an exceptional thickness and a very high grade for a project that could benefit from underground bulk mining. So that 426, the Ruby Deeps, and some of the other satellite discoveries that are around those two make that project on gold alone a world-class project. And then to add, not too far away on the south side of that Archimedes pit, this spectacular CRD with the extreme high grade overprint of gold. It's no wonder that i-80 Gold was recently able to do a financing that will bring them about $65 million to keep them moving forward. But the story doesn't actually end there, because they also have at their Granite Creek project, they have what also looks like a world-class project. There was historical mining at this Granite Creek area, and then they followed that mineralization deeper, and then they found what they're calling their South Pacific zone. And that South Pacific zone has now expanded to well beyond a 600-meter strike length. It has excellent thickness to it from top to bottom, and extremely good continuity of the high-grade gold. And that's really important in a high-grade gold mine, because if you have sporadic distribution of high grade, you're not going to have a very successful mine. You need continuity. I've heard a lot of times in the mining business that people say grade is king. Well, actually, continuity is king. If you don't have continuity, whether you're looking at a high grade deposit or a lower grade open pit deposit, you're not going to have a very successful mine. And in the case of Granite Creek, I believe it's on its way to becoming a future mine based on what they already know. But it gets even more exciting, because if you follow the rock package and the key structure that is likely the conduit for those fluids to make their way up into the South Pacific zone, you keep following that geology and that structural story, and it leads you to a 25 million ounce gold deposit. So it's definitely in the land of elephant deposits, and it looks like they have an elephant on their hand, because it's wide open to keep going along strike towards that 25 million ounce gold deposit, and it's still open at depth. And it has this excellent continuity of the high grade. So i-80 Gold is a multi-billion-dollar company in the making. And they have, in my opinion, 3 world-class discoveries that they're advancing towards very soon putting them into production. One of them is about to go into production, and they're maybe a year or two away from other deposits going into production. And that combination of exploring and developing at the same time 3 world-class deposits is quite a unique situation in my career. I've been following the business. I've been in the business since 1993, and I've never seen a company that has near-term production, that they're exploring and developing 3 world-class discoveries simultaneously. And that's why I confidently believe that they will be a multi-billion-dollar company of the future, and yet they're trading for well under $1 billion right now. For the investor that wants exposure to gold, silver, and base metals, with not a lot of downside risk, i-80 Gold is a perfect candidate. But as I said earlier, they're not the only ones in this Eureka camp that are finding high grades of silver, lead, and zinc with an overprint of high grade to bonanza grade gold. Right next door to i-80 Gold in Eureka is Paycore Minerals. And Paycore Minerals has also found one of these exceptional CRDs with the high grades of silver, lead, zinc, and an overprint of high grade to bonanza grades of gold. And recently, they announced an $8 million financing in January 2023, a bought deal financing. The next day, it was doubled to $16 million. So in these two companies, in a very short period of time, they're getting institutional investments of over $80 million. And that doesn't happen because of smoke and mirrors. That happens because of the reality of what they're finding. And Paycore will in February close off their $16 million bought deal financing, which will put them in a position to aggressively drill into their exceptional CRD, again with the high grade silver, lead, and zinc, and the overprint of very high grade gold. And the corridor of structures and the correct rock package extends from i-80 Gold's CRD for another 2,000 meters, where you run into the Paycore's exceptional CRD, and the favorable structural corridor and the right kind of rocks are on Paycore's ground for 2.5 kilometers. Another interesting thing is that not too long ago, i-80 Gold put out some geophysical data, and right in between where there is the CRD that i-80 Gold has found, and almost right in the middle of the i-80 Gold CRD and Paycore CRD, i-80 Gold has this large IP geophysical anomaly on their property. And I think that that has the potential. First of all, it's completely contained on i-80 Gold's ground. And I think that that has the potential of being the source of where the CRD that i-80 Gold is finding, as well as the potential that it could be the source of where the CRD is coming onto Paycore's ground. And Paycore has this corridor of this right structures, the right cracks in the earth, and also the right kind of rocks for those fluids that are carrying the CRD mineralization, and the high-grade gold mineralization continues for about 2.5 kilometers on Paycore's ground. And so Paycore, it's no wonder that this small junior that really only started trading in April of 2022 has been able to move forward so aggressively and get to the point that they've drilled several holes into the CRD and with the high-grade gold overprint, that now they're able to get a $16 million bought deal financing done, and will be completed in the next 10 days or so. But the story for CRDs doesn't stop there. In fact, if you look at the immediate area around Eureka, there was historical mining all the way from I-80 Gold's ground through Paycore's ground and on to Golden Lake Exploration's ground. And at Golden Lake Exploration, oh, by the way, those two companies talked about it previously, as you can see. They're sponsors of the Rocks and Stocks news reports. As you can see, I put that information up front when I talk about companies. And in the case of Golden Lake, they are also a sponsor of Rocks and Stocks News, and I'm an advisor to the company. So Golden Lake is right beside Paycore. And on Golden Lake's property, there is a bunch of historical mines, CRD mines on their property. They have also drilled into a CRD near their Eureka tunnel, where they have also found high grades of silver, lead, and zinc, and an overprint of high grade to bonanza grade gold. So they're in the same structural corridor, the same kind of rocks, and they have found the same mineralization in their drilling. And then recently they announced that they had done a bunch of surface sampling and around the historical mining, and guess what they found? High grades of CRD mineralization, high grades of silver, lead, and zinc, as well as high grades of gold. And what that indicates is the potential that not only do they have the CRD with the high grade to bonanza grade gold overprint near their Eureka tunnel, but they have multiple other targets that look like they could be in that same kind of situation as what you're seeing at I-80 Gold and also at Paycore and also on Golden Lake Exploration's ground. So then the CRD story doesn't end there, because Timberline Resources, who's also a sponsor of my reports, they have been focused mainly on their let me change the screen slightly here. They've been focused on a resource of gold that they have at their Lookout Mountain project, and they've been expanding that resource. And what really excites me about that work that they've done is that if you look at the rock packages and you look at the structures and you look at the gold mineralization, it's all trending towards the east. And immediately to the east is a very large IP anomaly. And it's contained right near this structural story, which is your vent that the fluids, and so you have to ask, well, where are those fluids coming from? And you see this big IP anomaly. Now, not only can that be the source of the gold mineralization that's coming in their resource, but it could also be a plumbing system for a CRD. As I said earlier, when talking about I-80 Gold and Paycore, right in between their two CRD discoveries is a big IP geophysical anomaly. And maybe even bigger is the one that's right beside the Lookout Mountain gold resource. So I'm very excited about them continuing that drilling to the east towards that IP anomaly, and then drilling into that IP anomaly in a very aggressive way. But recently, they also had excellent news out from they're the largest landholder in that Eureka mining camp. And it kind of goes I-80 Gold, Paycore, Golden Lake, and then this big land package that's held by Timberline. But they also have a project called New York Canyon that is right beside and just slightly to the southeast of the I-80 Gold and Paycore ground. And there has been significant historical mining. It's actually believed that maybe the first CRD mining in the 1860 timeframe was done on the New York Canyon project. You're looking at historical records there, and sometimes it's hard to figure these things out. But what is not difficult to figure out is that there was evidence of a significant amount of CRD mining on that property. And then they went in and did a regional, or not a regional, a property-wide surface sampling program. And guess what they found? They found high grades of CRD mineralization, silver, lead, and zinc, as well as high grades of gold. So you see the trend that is happening in this Eureka camp, from I-80 Gold to Paycore to over beside them is Timberline, below them is Golden Lake, and then Timberline has a bunch of property with also, that's their southern claim blocks in the Eureka trend, have a bunch of historical CRD mining as well. So this entire camp is exploding onto the scene as a one of the most important exploration camps in all of Nevada. And I think that trend is going to continue, because when you start finding CRDs with extreme high grades of silver, lead, and zinc, and then an overprint of high grade to bonanza grade gold, making the rock, the metal value in the rock in that area right off the charts, $1,000 to over $5,000 per ton of in situ rock metals values in the rock. It's an easy argument to make that the Eureka camp is becoming the most important exploration and development region in all of Nevada. And I'm very proud to have identified this area very early and have a group of sponsors that are in leading that charge as sponsors of my report, so I can put out a tremendous amount of content about those companies and really follow it from the early days to what I believe will be important future mines in Nevada of exceptionally high grades, CRDs, and the overprint of high grade gold, making for extremely high margin mines of the future. And that roster that I have in that area of I-80 Gold, Paycore Minerals, Golden Lake Exploration, and Timberline are the stars of that Eureka mining camp. Okay, so now another important part of Nevada is the Walker Lane trend on the western side of Nevada. And it's really had a quite a exciting development over the last couple years in that AngloGold Ashanti, which is a major gold mining company of the world, has really sort of put their flag in the Walker Lane trend, in the Bullfrog region of the Walker Lane trend. And so they spent about $600 million acquiring land in that area. It looks like the big mine that's going to start in that area is the Corvus, the mine that Corvus has found, and now AngloGold Ashanti will develop. But then right near that Corvus, in the Bullfrog camp, is their Silicon project. And Silicon has started out with a maiden resource of 3.4 million ounces of gold, oxide gold, at their Central Silicon project. And then to the south of that is the Merlin, which they're drilling, I think over 10 drill rigs are focused on expanding on that mineralization at the Silicon and the Merlin zones. And great things are happening there. So the Walker Lane trend is getting a lot of interest, and in the Walker Lane trend is Walker River Resources. They're also a sponsor of the Rocks and Stocks news reports. And what they have found at their Long Canyon project, which had historical mining of very high grades many decades ago, they've gone in there and they've done a lot of drilling in this Lapon Mountain, if you will. It's not officially called the Lapon Mountain, but I affectionately call it the Lapon Mountain. And from the the mining and the drilling, they've established an area of about 600 meters from side to side on that mountain of high-grade gold and lower-grade gold mineralization for about 600 meters. And then from top to bottom, they have shown that that is about an 800 meters from top to bottom. So this whole area has widespread high-grade gold mineralization, and there's a network of structures, and there's also quite a large area of alteration. So when these high-grade fluids make their way up through the cracks in the earth, these faults, when they chemically react with the country rock around them, they chemically alter that rock. And so when you have a very large, when you have a structural corridor with a very large alteration zone, and then you've got this widespread mineralization, it is suggesting that it is a very powerful and big gold mineralizing system that got that gold up into the Lapon Mountain. But it doesn't stop there, because if you go to the bottom of the Lapon Mountain and you look at the structures that are coming down the mountain, they sort of come together where there is a cross-cutting structure at the Lapon Canyon. And right at that juncture is where they have some of their most intense alteration. And then that alteration continues onto past the Lapon Canyon, up onto the other side where there's another mountain, and there is a structural network there, and a large area of alteration. So these indicators are quite, without argument, showing that they have a very large and powerful gold mineralizing system that has a wide distribution of gold mineralization, including wide distribution of very high grades of gold. Then in late 2022, they drilled over at their Pikes Peak target, and their surface sampling and drilling suggests that they have a porphyry over there, and it got some good sniffs from their early few drill holes into that porphyry target. And why that's so important is a gold mineralizing system needs a heat engine. It's what enables these hot fluids that contain the gold mineralization, and probably copper in this case, to make its way up through the cracks in the earth and over to the Lapon Canyon. So I think they've got a heck of a combination of the potential heat source at Pikes Peak, and then the distribution of the high-grade gold mineralization over a large area with the network of structures and the big amount of alteration. I mean, when it all comes down to it, finding projects that could be, 2 to 10 million ounce targets are not easy to find anywhere in the world. When you find one like that, which I think Walker River Resources has found, to have one in Nevada, is even more exciting. So stay tuned for more news out of that company. And I think they got a heck of a future ahead of them. And 2023 is going to be a very important breakthrough year for the company. Okay. So another company in Nevada is Blackrock Silver. They're also a sponsor of the Rocks and Stocks news reports. I made them a pick. I interviewed their CEO in, I think it was about November or early December of 2022, because they put out some great news from their Silver Cloud project. But I made them a pick. Also, I invited them to be a sponsor of my reports, and they were kind enough to take me up on that offer. And in addition to picking them or making them a sponsor of my reports, I also made them one of my tax loss selling picks. And I also made them one of my deep value plays. And the reason for the deep value play and the key driver, if you will, of their valuation going forward is their project in Tonopah. And in Tonopah, this was a very important historical mine for silver in Nevada. So the Nevada is known as the silver state. I think most people think of it for gold, but in reality, it was silver that got things really started for mining in Nevada. And Tonopah was one of the top two most important silver mining districts in Nevada. And Blackrock Silver was able to consolidate a region that had been broken up with a bunch of different sort of a patchwork of claims held by different parties. And they were able to consolidate that into one big project. And so they started drilling on it, and they had great success. They came out with a maiden resource of about 50 million ounces of gold with a very high grade of about 450 grams per ton of silver, silver equivalent. It's a combination of silver and gold, mainly silver, but so it has very high grade maiden resource for silver. And what is also interesting is that when SilverCrest did their initial maiden resource on Las Chispas mine in Mexico, I'm going to be talking about SilverCrest more later, but because of their Las Chispas mine, it's a very important mine because it's very low cost of production, very high grade mine of silver that they're mining. And what is also parallel for Blackrock is that when SilverCrest made their first maiden resource at Las Chispas, it was around the same size and actually a little lower grade. And since then, they've now built it into a mine. And they continue to drill it. They continue to build on the resource. They focused in on the high-grade portions of that resource, and their average grade went up dramatically, and the size of the deposit went up dramatically. And now it's, as of November 2022, it's gone into full commercial production. And in reality, I think that what Blackrock Silver has at Tonopah could be as important of a mine of the future as Las Chispas. And why I say that is that they've actually continued to drill beyond the footprint of the maiden resource, and they pretty much doubled that. And they have a lot of ground to keep on growing that, and they can focus in on the high-grade portions of this epithermal vein system. Which is exactly the same thing as what SilverCrest Las Chispas mine is. And so I think that they have a tremendous asset in their project in Tonopah that will turn into a future important mine. But then they also November or late November or December sometime, I can't remember exactly, they announced a drill hole from their Silver Cloud project, which is in the north of the Tonopah project. And there they hit high grade to bonanza grades of silver and gold. You're talking about 70 grams per ton of gold and hundreds of grams per ton of silver in an epithermal vein that has had very little drilling. And what they basically did with that drill hole is they drilled into the boiling zone of an epithermal vein, and that is a very important juncture when you're exploring an epithermal vein. And I believe that that epithermal vein is going to become a very important part of their story. You just don't find those kind of situations very often where you have an epithermal vein and you tag the boiling zone and you tag bonanza grades of gold and silver. So that's another additional asset that they have, but it doesn't stop there. They're also involved with a very exciting lithium project in Nevada, and that lithium project is near a very big lithium project, and their joint venture project, where they brought in a partner to that's focused on lithium to advance that project, but they retain a very significant interest in it. The other company spends the money and they sort of go along for the ride. So they've got a network of epithermal veins in Tonopah where they found a substantial maiden resource that's expanding with very high grade that is similar to the maiden resource that SilverCrest had at their last Chispas mine. Then they've got the Silver Cloud project where they've hit the boiling zone of an epithermal vein and tagged bonanza grades of gold and silver. And then they've got this lithium interest. So collectively, I believe that they've got the assets that suggest that they are very undervalued, a deep value play, but importantly, they have many catalysts to unlock that shareholder value. So I'm very excited about what Blackrock has in Nevada. A new recent sponsor of my show is a company called Athena Gold. And they're also in the Walker Lane trend of Western Nevada. They're about 50 miles north of that Bullfrog district where AngloGold Ashanti is really excited. As I said earlier, they've spent $600 million acquiring ground in that area. One of those was to purchase Corvus Gold, which looks like they've have a mine in that Bullfrog camp. And now they've also, AngloGold has been moving forward with their Silicon project, where they have a 3.4 million ounce maiden resource of oxide gold. And so why Athena has excited me, and why I'm so happy that they took me up recently on the offer to have them as a sponsor of my reports, is because they have drilled 3 holes into what looks like a very important new discovery of oxide gold in Nevada with their first 3 holes. But what makes it even more exciting is that they are they're hitting very high grades. You could say for an oxide deposit that they are hitting bonanza grades for an oxide open pit target. Now, last week I did an interview, and I'm going to talk about that later when I'm going through my rocksandstocks.substack.com site. Is I did an interview with their key technical person, their key geologist, and their president CEO. And we went over in that interview, and I hope you go check it out, that there is a big structural corridor, and right in the middle of a couple of important east-west structures is a very large alteration zone. And those alteration zones are very important because when the fluids make their way up from the depths and interact with the country rock, they chemically alter that country rock. So when you see these big alteration zones, and then you've got high-grade mineralization and associated structures, it's a very good indicator that they could be sitting on a 1 to 5 million ounce kind of target. Now, of course, it needs a lot more drilling because there are only 3 holes into it. But when you have such a large corridor of structures and alteration, you have to pay attention, especially when they're hitting such high grades for a oxide discovery. I think that this is a very underappreciated, important new discovery of oxide gold in Nevada in the Walker Lane trend. Athena has a microscopic valuation, and I think you're going to see that valuation change dramatically and move much higher in 2023. I'm very impressed with the team and the quality of project, and I really had an enjoyable interview recently with them, and I invite you to check that out. You can find it on the rocksandstocks.substack.com, or you can also go to my YouTube channel and look up Rocks and Stocks News on YouTube. All right, so I dealt with all my Nevada stories. Another key theme that I'm very bullish on are orogenic gold explorers. And why that's the case is, if you look at the Fosterville mine in Australia, which is an orogenic gold mine, when they went deeper and found the Swan Zone in that orogenic system, it turned into a very low cost and extreme high grade mine with very high margins. And the company that built that mine to mine the Swan Zone was Kirkland Lake. Kirkland Lake was already a pretty sizable company before they started mining that Swan Zone. And it was a company maker for what was already a pretty sizable company, because the cost of production is so low. Now, these aren't big deposits. They're thin zones, but they have extreme high grade. And that makes for very low cost mining, underground mining, and very profitable mining, because the grade is so high, it gives you a high margin. And when Kirkland Lake was mining that, they became one of the best performing gold mining stocks, one of the lowest cost producers, and ultimately were bought out and was a huge winner for shareholders. So those are the basics of why I like orogenic gold explorers. Now, one of the companies that I follow is Sokoman Minerals. Now, Sokoman Minerals, on their Moosehead project, has been drilling into an orogenic gold system for a few years. They were really focused on the near surface stuff, where they found a lot of very high grade gold widely distributed near the surface, let's say within the first couple hundred meters. But then in September of 2022, they announced a spectacular hole, which was their deepest drilling into the eastern trend, and they hit 3 meters of 102 grams per ton gold. That was part of a 10-meter intersection of 42 grams per ton gold. So this is bonanza grade, and they're finding it at about 250 to 300 meters of vertical depth, which is not very deep for an orogenic gold system. But what also was interesting is that They're now calling that their 463 zone. I call it the jewelry box zone. And because that's what the Swan Zone was really, it was what we call in the business a jewelry box. And I believe that they've now tagged into the top of a jewelry box at their 463 zone. And it's not just the grade that makes me make that argument. They had been drilling what they call their eastern trend for the past couple, 2-3 years. And then when they hit this 463 zone, they sent a camera down that drill hole, and they were able to analyze the rocks as they go at depth. And they have a very talented structural geologist that analyzed those images. And he now has a model where that you've got this eastern trend, and then coming from another direction is the 460 is the where that 463 zone was hit. And this model that I'm showing you with my hands here is exactly what the Swan Zone looks like. It's got sort of cross-cutting structures that it makes up the Swan Zone. So this is another reason why I believe they're on the top of a Swan Zone. Now, currently they're drilling another new, after they hit that 463 zone, they drilled another hole into it called 505, which was a little higher than the Bonanza hole that they hit. And that hole is pending, but now they've also drilled another hole into that 463 zone they have another hole going down to that 463 zone as we speak. So they have a lot of catalysts. They've got the 505 drill hole number, which is pending. Then they've got the new hole, which is going down towards that 463 zone as we speak. This is a very exciting juncture for the exploration of an orogenic gold system. As I said earlier, I think that they've hit the top of a Swan Zone, and I'm very excited about the pending hole and the new hole that's going down. And ultimately, I think that that's going to lead to a lot more holes going into what they call the 463, and I affectionately call the jewelry box. So that's the Sokoman story on their Moosehead project for their orogenic gold system. Another company that's in the orogenic gold system camp is Galantas Gold. Their orogenic gold system is in Northern Ireland. They've been doing most of their drilling on the Joshua and the Kearney zones, which are very close, in close proximity to each other. They have another zone that's in between those and some satellites around it. And all of these zones are tightly packed into a small area. And those tightly packed zones have a key structure. Again, these deep cracks in the earth that go down for several kilometers are the important conduits that bring these high-grade fluids up towards the surface in an orogenic gold system. So at their Kearney and their Joshua vein, they've hit a lot of high-grade to bonanza grades of gold. And equally as important is they've hit a network of what are called dilation zones. And what those are is in these, the zones, the Kearney and the Joshua, they have these areas where the rocks open up and the fluids can pool out. So these dilation zones, as well as the known zones and the mineralization in those zones, are going to lead them deeper. And as they get deeper, I think what is going to happen is that they're going to show that these veins all come together into a common source, one source. And I believe that that's going to be associated with the structure just to the immediate south. when you start getting those zones consolidating into one, it becomes a very important and exciting part of the exploration of an orogenic gold system. And I believe strongly that that's where they are heading, is to proving up that these tightly packed zones are all part of one system at depth that's associated to this big crack in the earth that is just to the immediate south of those zones that they found near surface with the high-grade gold, bonanza grade gold, and dilation zones. Now they've also added a second project, a VMS project in Scotland, in fact. And I'm going to be interviewing their CEO very soon here. And we're going to talk about the VMS asset that they found. I believe the key economic driver of this company is the orogenic gold system that they have in Northern Ireland. But I will always pay attention when a company has an important VMS discovery, because those can also be very lucrative to mines of the future. And we're going to dig deeper into that and their orogenic gold system when I do an upcoming interview with the management. But stay tuned for that. And I believe very strongly in what Galantas Gold has for an economic driver at their orogenic gold system in Northern Ireland. Okay, a new sponsor for my website is a company called Dynasty Gold. And Dynasty Gold has a project in Ontario, near the town of Dryden, right off of a key road that leads to Dryden. And they're a brand new player in the orogenic gold discovery arena. In January 2022, they announced a remarkable series of 3 holes drilled into an orogenic gold system that were deeper than all of the historic drilling that had been done on their property. And as they got deeper, as is often the case in these orogenic gold systems, they had a spectacular hit. One hole hit 1.5 meters of 246 grams of gold. And it was part of a 3-meter hit of 101 grams per ton of gold. Now, another hole not very far away hit 43.47 grams per ton gold over 3 meters. And a third hole had 25.1 grams per ton gold over 1.5 meters. And these are at depths that suggests that these 3 hits are lining up into one important zone for an orogenic gold system. And it's at their Thundercloud project, and I'm blown away, because usually you have to go very deep into these orogenic gold systems in order to hit these bonanza grades, but they're finding it fairly close to surface in the first 200 meters of vertical depth in their deepest holes, by the way, into that orogenic gold system. I'm pretty impressed with the way those 3 holes are lining up the bonanza grades of gold, high grade to bonanza grades of gold, and most importantly, how that is giving them the direction to keep following those deeper. And that's the real exciting thing for an orogenic gold system, is when you can start finding that bonanza grades and then continue to follow it, because as you get deeper, you're getting closer to the heat engine that where the pressure and the heat is powerful enough to get these high-grade fluids in an orogenic gold system higher, closer to surface. So they're already in the bonanza grades, very close to surface. And they are lining up in a way that is giving them the direction to keep following that zone deeper. And I think that has a very likely outcome, that they've got an important orogenic gold discovery that will have continuity and could be quite an impressive discovery, which I think it will prove to be. So that's the Dynasty Gold story. Next company I'm going to talk about is Amex Exploration. They have a remarkable orogenic gold system in Quebec. At their high grade zone, they've traced that high grade continuity from basically at surface to over 1,000 meters of depth. And that 1,000-meter number is quite important because at the Red Lake mine, which is also an orogenic gold system, they went down 1,000 meters before they started hitting the bonanza grade golds, and then that continued for another 1,000 meters. They've already shown in the first 1,000 meters that they have excellent continuity of the high grade, and it still remains open at depth. Now, in addition to the high grade zone, they have also found other high grade zones in close proximity. So you have a very tightly packed group of high grade zones in an orogenic gold system. And I believe what's happening here is that as they follow those deeper, they are going to come together into one source. Now, the next question is, well, what is the fault or structure or deep crack in the earth that it was the conduit for those fluids to make their way up into these high-grade zones that they're finding are tightly packed at their Perron project? And near to the south of those zones is what's called the Perron fault, and it kind of goes east to west. And then just to the immediate north is another fault that's called the Normatel fault, and it's kind of trending towards from northeast or northwest to northeast, but it's coming down at an angle where not very far from the tightly packed group of high grade zones that they've found, but these two faults pinch together into very close proximity to each other. I think the key target for the source of these zones is the Perron fault, but equally as important, and it could be the most important, is where the Perron fault and the Normatel fault pinch close together as you move to the immediate east of this network of high-grade zones that are tightly packed. I think the Perron fault could be the most important, but I also believe that where they tighten up could also be the source at depth of where all these fluids made with the high-grade gold made their way to surface. And what's equally as exciting is I've been talking about this eastern area for several months now, and just recently the company came out and announced that they are planning a series of a bunch of drill holes into that eastern portion where the Perron fault and the Normatel fault come very close together. So I'm very excited about that drilling. I think that they have a future mine at their high grade zone and more potential mines at the zones that are in close proximity to that. But then I'm always wondering, well, how does this all act as you get deeper? Do these zones all come together, and are they associated with the Perron fault, or where the Normatel and the Perron fault come close together? So we're going to hear more about all of that in 2023. But again, I believe they've got a future mine on their hands. and I believe it will be mined by a much bigger company that ends up buying them out at a significant premium to their current valuation. All right, now I'm going to move into base metals. And my favorite base metal company is a company called 9 Mile Metals. They're a sponsor of the Rocks and Stocks news reports. They're in the Bathurst mining camp of New Brunswick. This is truly elephant country for volcanogenic massive sulfides deposits. It's one of the top 3 VMS mining camps worldwide. They found 2 new massive sulfide occurrences in this important mining camp with exceptional grades at or near surface. There are 2 areas of discovery of massive sulfides are about 20 kilometers apart. What originally got me excited about the company is at their 9 Mile Brook lens, which was reported in the fall of 2022, they found a very thick lens of very high grades. It's about 10 meters thick. It comes right to surface where it daylights and has up to 10% copper in it. It also has high grades of zinc, lead, and gold and silver as well. And what's important is the 9 Mile Brook lens that's at the surface is the top of a VMS system. So then the important question is, well, where is the source of that lens? And what could that source look like? When you have a thick lens at the top of a VMS system with very high grades, it's indicating that the source of that should be also very big and very high grade. And to consider that they're finding that in what is one of the world's most important VMS mining camps is very exciting. But as they were waiting for the drill permits to get back into that 9 Mile Brook lens area, where they have some important structural hinges and that can be seen in the geophysics and other targets, they moved over 20 kilometers away to their California Lake project. And the shallow drilling at California Lake also encountered massive sulfides, core that was just full of massive sulfides, and returned very handsome grades of zinc, lead, silver, and gold and copper. So this is another important massive sulfide discovery that what remains to be found is the source of that as well. And that has very high potential. Then they've got a series of other geophysical anomalies that look like they could be massive sulfide occurrences as well. So this company's in elephant country for VMS mines. They are finding important and exciting new massive sulfide occurrences with very high grades in them. And the source of those should be big and high grade as well, and they remain to be found. They're currently drilling in that 9 Mile Brook lens area, and I'm very excited to hear any updates coming from that drilling. I think that their current valuation, which is around $15 million Canadian, is extremely undervalued, considering that they're in elephant country. They're finding new massive sulfide occurrences. They are finding exceptional grades, and the sources of those massive sulfide occurrences remain to be found. But they are drilling for them as we speak. Okay. Next company I want to talk about is in Mexico. It's my company where Advanced Lithium is a sponsor of the Rocks and Stocks news reports. I'm also the president and CEO of the company and a big shareholder. As you can imagine from the name of the company, Advanced Lithium, we're involved in lithium. We have 13 salt lakes or salars in central Mexico that have lithium, potassium, and boron. that starts right at the surface. And you can see those, the size of those salt lakes from Google Earth. And in fact, if you go to the lithium section of our website, you can see a series of those salars. We're currently working on a plan to develop those lithium projects into near-term production. Stay tuned, because I think you're going to see some news out of those projects in the not too distant future. That's going to be quite important stuff. But in addition to that, we had a project in Kenya, West Kenya, that was part of a joint venture with Barrick. So it's a Barrick-sized project, and we owned a 3% royalty on those. I approached a royalty company called Orogen Royalties, which I'm going to talk about later, and they wanted to buy that off of us, and they paid us $120,000 US, and they also gave us 100% interest in the Serape project. Serape is over a 50 square kilometer project, and it's right beside SilverCrest's new Las Chispas mine. Las Chispas is an exceptional new mine. I'm going to talk more about it later, because they're actually a pick of mine, and I'll explain why later. But to the immediate south of Las Chispas is First Majestic's Ermitaño mine, and both of these mines are epithermal vein mines. They're very low cost and high grade to make for high margin, and mines that create a lot of free cash flow. Las Chispas, Ermitaño, and Serape, our project, are all epithermal vein projects. At Serape, there are two known veins, the Serape vein, which is 5 kilometers, and the Chiltepán vein, which is 2 kilometers. Both Serape and Chiltepán have seen limited drilling. The grades that were encountered in that past drilling are very similar to the grades that are in the surface sampling of the outcrops. There's substantial outcrops at both the Serape and the Chiltepán veins that show widespread gold and silver mineralization. But the grades are what you usually find above the boiling zone of an epithermal vein. And the grades in the past drilling is consistent with that grades that they hit in the surface sampling of the outcropping veins. So our argument for the quality of that project is that there's a very good chance that they have not drilled, that the past drilling did not hit the boiling zone of those epithermal veins. And so we're putting together a game plan and a drilling plan to explore for what we believe are undiscovered boiling zones of 2 epithermal veins that are very large and have widespread gold and silver mineralization. Now, another exciting potential is that at both Las Chispas, to our immediate south, and Ermitaño, both have found networks of epithermal veins, quite a substantial amount at both Las Chispas and Ermitaño. Now, Serape is in the same network of faults and in the same network of rocks as the Ermitaño and Las Chispas. That corridor continues onto our over 50 square kilometer project. And so I think a second potential is to find a cluster of epithermal veins on our project. So we've got a very underexplored project at Serape that is next door to the important Las Chispas mine, and then right beside that is the Ermitaño. Same kind of mineralization, same kind of structural corridor, same kind of rocks. So I believe that we are what I call a phoenix rising from the ashes kind of story. We're in the ashes because we had some pressure on our stock when the Mexican government announced that they were going to do a national lithium company. But I think that there are some things happening behind the scenes that will help us on our lithium projects. But at the same time, we're going to be working to drill our Serape project. And I think those two efforts will make us a phoenix rising from the ashes story in the exploration world. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to diamonds. And Arctic Star Exploration is a sponsor of the Rocks and Stocks News Report. I believe that diamonds, explorers and miners could be the top contrary play in the entire mining sector. The reason that I say that is that the price of diamonds are at all-time highs right now. Yet the stocks in diamond companies are getting absolutely no love whatsoever. And I believe the reason that Arctic Star should be getting more love, and if we were in a hotter market for diamond stocks, they would be several multiples of their current valuation. Why I say that with confidence is they've got a large land package that's next to the Acadie and in close proximity to the Diavik diamond mines in Canada. These were the what put Canada on the map in the diamond mining world. And they have a big land package in close proximity to those two mines. But importantly, they found kimberlites that have excellent diamond distribution curves that suggest that they should have somewhere close to or over 1 carat per ton grades. And they have diamond indicator minerals that suggest they should find high quality big diamonds. There's certain indicator minerals that are only to have chemical compositions that are only known to occur in the environment in the upper mantle where large diamonds of high quality are grown. And so they have these unique diamond indicator minerals and exciting diamond distribution curves in new kimberlites that are being found in close proximity to important diamond mines. And as I think that I think that there's a potential that the diamond stocks could get hotter, but most importantly, I think that as they do more work to assess the potential of their diamond bearing kimberlites, that they have the realistic potential to unlock substantial shareholder value. So if you're into diamonds, which I'm into and have been for very long, I've done a lot of research on diamonds. In fact, I was a co-author of a peer-reviewed paper on unique diamond indicator minerals and their importance for diamond exploration. In 2004, when we published that paper, some of the stuff that we talked about was considered controversial by the diamond exploration world. You know, as often happens, 19 years later, some of those what were considered controversial by some in the diamond exploration world are now becoming more well respected, let's say. And I see some of those unique diamond indicator minerals in what Arctic Star has found, and I'm very excited about the kimberlite occurrences that they have in near the Diavik and Acadie diamond mines. All right, so now I'm going to move into cash-making machines of mines. This group is, they've got common characteristics. They found high-grade, low-cost new mines with high margins that will generate remarkable free cash flow. These are less risky investment opportunities for investors that want exposure to gold and silver mining stocks. They're all new mines that are early into the transition from development into mining. In the Lassonde curve, there are two high growth trends. One is upon the discovery success, then they go into the development discount window, and then they have their biggest success when they bring those into production. All of these companies are in that transition from the development discount window into new production that I think will lead them much higher, because when you're looking at mining stocks, the ones that get the highest premium are those with high grades, low costs, high margins that generate a lot of free cash flow. And all of these companies that are in my cash making machines of mines picks have those characteristics. One of those is SilverCrest Metals. At SilverCrest Las Chispas mine, it went into commercial production in November of 2022. But in the early days of mining a new mine, they kind of have to rely on what they're trying to do is prove up the economic evaluations that were done prior to the mining. In their case, the economic evaluations were done a couple years prior to commercial production, and it showed very low costs and high grades. Now, in the early days of a new mine, they go through optimization of that mine, and it takes a couple quarters of production to really show that what the real numbers are compared to the economic evaluation numbers. And as they do that, more institutional investors will see those numbers from the first few quarters of full commercial production, and then they get excited. But that phenomenon creates an opportunity for real retail investors to get in before the big institutional investors start really getting hot to trot on a project. Now, it is important to note that since their economic valuation that was done a couple of years ago, there's been significant inflation. So their costs that were in the economic evaluations will likely go up. But they were starting from such a low base in the economic evaluation. They estimated that their cost of production would be about $6.80 or somewhere around that price. And yet they were going to be mining somewhere over 700 grams per ton of silver. So you've got extremely low cost there and high grade for high margins. So even if the inflation brings up that number, and let's say it even brought it up by 20%, you're still looking at less than around $8 of cost to produce an ounce of silver. And inflation doesn't affect the grade. So they will still be mining a very high grade. There's a big gap between that estimated value in the economic assessments, tack on a 20% increase, which puts you at about $8 of cost of producing an ounce of silver. But there's still, $14 or more above that is the current price of silver. So that's a very healthy margin. And that's why it's important to look at low cost producers, because they are they have protection against inflation or any other reasons for added costs. Because they have such low cost, they can absorb increases in the price. And when you have a high grade mine like Las Chispas, it will create a lot of free cash flow even with a higher cost of producing it, because you're starting at such a low base. So I believe that they are going to be one of the lowest cost producers. Even if you inflate the price of their costs, they will still be one of the lowest cost producers of silver in the business. And they will have very high margins and create a lot of free cash flow. So that's why I like SilverCrest. Another Mexican mining company is Orla Mining. In Orla's case, they're in the state of Zacatecas and Mexico, and they have their Camino Rojo mine that went into production in 2022. It's an open pit oxide gold mine, low cost producer of gold that generates a lot of free cash flow. Their work as they're mining is to continue to expand the mine life at Camino Rojo. And they also have other mines, one in Nevada and one in Central America, that look to be future mines that are in their pipeline. I think another important catalyst for Orla is, as gold has been improving since 2022, their stock has been following that trend. It's tracking the price, the bullish trend in gold, but then now they'll start to prove up in their mining operations that they do have very low cost, high margins, and I believe that they will outperform their peers. The production numbers will be the primary driver of their valuation, but a secondary driver will be gold going higher, and more investors coming into the sector looking for low risk ways to have exposure to gold stocks. And I think Orla Mining falls into that category. Another cash making machine of a mine is MAG Silver. They're also in the state of Zacatecas, Mexico. They're just outside of the town of Fresnillo. They are showing how remarkable their mine is at generating free cash flow. This mine just outside of Fresnillo is part of a joint venture with one of the most famous silver mining companies in the world, which is Fresnillo PLC. And what's interesting is, as they were ramping up to full commercial production in 2022, MAG Silver didn't have to send any money to the joint venture to complete the commercial production, because even in the early days of ramping up, the mine was making so much free cash flow that they didn't have to contribute any money to the operations. It was self-building, if you will. And another important recent development was, I have written here, I see I have to edit it, but in early 2023, they plugged the mine into the national power grid that will help them finish ramping up to full nameplate production. And as they do that, MAG Silver will show that they're one of the 2 lowest cost producers of silver in the entire sector. This is another story that will attract big institutions to take progressively larger positions in the stock. But as they're going through these developments up to nameplate production, it gives retail investors a chance to get in there before big waves of institutional investors join the party. All right, now I want to talk about a high growth royalty company. In the 1990s, I remember a company called Franco-Nevada, which was one of the best performing gold stocks in the business, and they were a royalty company. The business model is pretty straightforward. They have a low cost of operating the company. They let other companies build and operate mines. They sit back and collect royalties from those mines. In the case of Orogen Royalties, they transitioned into a royalty company with cash flowing from their Ermitaño. At their Ermitaño, they have a 2% royalty. It's in Sonora, and it's they optioned it to First Majestic, that found and built the Ermitaño mine. At Ermitaño, they're doing work to increase the proven and probable reserves to add to the mine life. Based on the drilling that's been reported, it looks like they're going to add significant mine life because they found the Ermitaño, a central zone, and then as they go deeper, they have the Ermitaño Luna, and it's a big zone of very high grade of gold and silver. And so that's cash flowing to them now, and it's adding to their cash position. And it looks like it has a long mine life that will show more data in the not too distant future as they increase their reserves. Another key flagship asset for them is their Silicon project in Nevada. They have a 1% royalty on that project. That one is being explored and developed by AngloGold Ashanti. The maiden resource is 3.4 million ounces of oxide gold. They're aggressively drilling that. I believe they have over 10 drill rigs currently running on that at their Silicon project. And in the not too distant future, they're going to be putting out some economic studies on that Silicon project. They have two important zones and more that could become important. One is their central Silicon resource. That's that 3.4 million ounces of oxide gold. And to its south, AngloGold is drilling the Merlin zone, which is also part of the project that Orogen holds a 1% royalty on. To complement their flagship royalties at Ermitaño and the potential for a new one at Silicon, they have a pipeline of many other projects that could become future important royalty assets. They're sort of at a crucial juncture for a royalty company, as they formerly had royalty assets, but no cash flowing royalties. Ermitaño has vaulted them into that cash flowing royalty company, and it's growing their cash position, and they've got a lot of other assets in the pipeline that are being explored by other companies, including major mining companies. So they have an excellent pipeline, and I think that that's ultimately going to lead them to be a much larger company in the not too distant future. All right. In late 2022, I put out my tax loss selling season picks. Every year at the end of the year, plenty of mining stocks, especially the small ones, they go on sale not for fundamental reasons, but because investors are locking in losses for tax purposes. It's not really trading based on fundamental reasons. And in 2022, December, I picked a group of companies that were what I considered very oversold, had the potential for excellent performance in the first couple months of 2023. And then I believe that their fundamentals will drive them to have excellent years in 2023. Blackrock Silver was one of those. I talked about them earlier. HighGold Mining in Alaska. I picked them not only as a tax loss selling pick, but a deep value play, because they have a resource that I think could be over 2 million ounces. It's currently sitting at about 1.2 with a grade of about 10 grams per ton. And if you run the numbers of what value they're getting in market value for those ounces of ground in the ground, it's trading at a very deep value proposition. And then they also have another zone that I think could be a 1 million or more ounce target at their Ellis zone. So I'm a big fan of HighGold. Firefox is in Finland. There's Rupert Resources is having a lot of success in Finland. There's other companies in Finland, but there's not very many because all the early movers like Firefox acquired large land packages in the greenstone belt of Finland, which is where you find these orogenic gold systems. They've hit some excellent grades in their drilling, but I think they're very undervalued, and I like that Firefox story a lot. Amex, I talked about earlier, as an orogenic gold play that I'm not going to add to. You can go back in the video to hear more about that. Bell Copper is looking for an elephant of a copper project in Arizona. And Arizona is known for these very extremely large copper systems. And I think Bell Copper could have one of those. And they're in the very early days of drilling into it. I don't think they've hit the sweet spot of it yet, but I think that they will. Grand Portage, GPG is their symbol. They're another Alaska play that I think is a deep value proposition as well as a tax loss selling victim. And they have a resource of over 1 million ounces. It's got a grade of about 10 grams per ton. Those kind of deposits are not easy to find. There's not very many of them out there. Likely going to be mined by a much bigger company in the future. And I picked them as a tax loss selling company and a deep value play in my 2022 year in review report. All right. So I'm going to be adding more to this index because I've been doing a lot of in the news shows lately and have uncovered another group of companies that I think will end up in my index. And if you just want a bit of a heads up on those, you can go to my Rocks and Stocks page. One thing you'll notice here is these are notes to paid subscribers that I put out on February 4th. Since I've transitioned to doing all my work, putting it out on Substack at rocksandstocks.substack.com, a very kind group of investors have paid to be subscribers. So I put notes out to paid subscribers, and that one, you can see it on my screen because I'm a paid subscriber, if you will. I get access to it because it's my website. But if you want to be paid subscriber and get my notes, you would not offend me. Here's a group of, here's one of my in the news shows. I talked about Timberline Resource, Goliath Resources, and Orogen Royalties when they put news out around February the 2nd. On February the 1st, I talked about the Federal Reserve continues their weak dollar policy, which is bullish for gold and other metals. And then I had a few companies, Walker River Resources, Emergent Metals, and Suma Silver on that show. And Goliath, Emergent, and Suma Silver will all be future picks of mine. You'll find them in my pick section of the index that I'll be adding to. Athena Gold, they made an impressive discovery of oxide that I talked about earlier, but I did an interview on February 1st with the key geologist and their CEO, and I invite you to check that out. Here's another of my notes to paid subscribers. Stocks in the news on January 31st. I talked about Galantas, Faraday Copper, 9 Mile Metals, Orla Mining, SilverCrest, and Advanced Lithium. Rocks and Stocks news on companies in the news on January 30th. And Rocks and Stocks news update on trends and stocks. And then I I do these interviews and I do these notes to paid subscribers and in sector reports. I just wanted to get a feel, you to get a feel for what I do on advance or on these various different companies in my Rocks and Stocks news that you can find at substack.com. You go to rocksandstocks.substack.com. Another place you can always find my stuff is on YouTube. When I do my videos, the thing that's different about the Substack is that I also do written reports, and they only go out on the Substack. But my video reports go out on Substack as well as on my YouTube channel at Rocks and Stocks News on YouTube, and you can find those by going there. All right, so that's my show for today. And as always, my shows are for information and research purposes only. Before you make any investment decisions, you have to talk to your financial advisors and do your homework. I'm always talking about doing your homework. I think you can do that on my reports. You can do that with the interviews that I do. But then go to the company's websites, look at their corporate presentations, look at their news releases, try to understand as well as you can the companies that you're investing in. Because if you understand the companies you're invested in, you'll make more logical investments. You won't make emotional investments. Those that make emotional investments generally don't do their homework on the companies. And what they do is they watch the stock action to evaluate what's going on with the company. And I think that's backwards. I think that technical indicators are important, but fundamental indicators are equally as important. Technicals can help you time your investments, but the fundamentals tell you which companies to invest in. And that's what I try to provide to my viewers and readers, is the combination of fundamental evaluation as well as technical indicators for timing purposes. And I believe you should do that homework to understand your investments so that you'll make logical investments, not emotional investments. And that's a recipe for success, whether you're looking at the mining sector, technology, any sector really. On that note, have a great day and we'll talk to you soon.